Hello and welcome to my spoiler review of The Suicide Squad, a movie where an awful lot happens. So this is the way I'm going to cover it, the way I'm going to break it down. You've got the spoiler review that you're watching right now. I'm going to do a live watch along tonight where you're really going to get my reaction to each and every bit of the movie when it debuts at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on HBO Max. So I hope you'll join me for that either live or it'll stay up and you can watch the movie with me at your leisure. And then also I'm going to do a video tomorrow where I'm going to rank all the characters. So we'll really do a deep dive on the characters there. So what's going to happen in this spoiler review? Well, I'm going to go into detail on the things that I didn't like about the film, but also on the things that I did like about the film. I know that a number of you have really enjoyed this film, so I have no interest in hating on it. I just want to explain my position, and I want to party with you on the things that we both liked. So on that note, I'm going to start with my favorite scenes, and I urge you to share your own down below, and for all these categories, your least favorite scenes, your favorite visuals, etc. All right, so favorite scenes. By far and away, I thought the best scene in the movie was Peacemaker's Rampage. I thought he really crossed a line there from likable character to truly despicable. And of course, he is playing the villain of the movie, it turns out. But I thought that he crossed a line in that he went to a place where I don't really know how he could have his own show. Right? I think like there's likable villains like Hans Gruber, where you would, obviously he can't have his own show. But, by the way, of course, everybody thought while watching the movie that Peacemaker died because they thought Bloodsport killed him. But of course, for those of us who know he has an HBO Max show coming up, I thought maybe at that point it might have been a prequel. Then, of course, there's the end credit scene where they're going to the hospital to see someone who survived. And one of you wrote me a story in the UK about your own theater experience where everyone in the theater was like, oh, I bet it's Rick Flag. And I thought that was funny because Rick Flag was so sympathetic from this scene, from this sequence in the third act, that I too would have loved it to be Rick Flag. But unfortunately, because James Gunn here is depicting a crummy world. Who survived? Of course it was Peacemaker. And that's to get his own show. And I'm real curious, again, as to how they're going to spin it to make anybody want to spend any time with him, because he's just so horrible. And we'll talk about some of the things that he did in my least favorite scene. But I thought that to his credit, John Cena certainly sold being a despicable person here. But I thought that what really made this work and tug on the old heartstrings was Joel Kinnaman and Daniela Melchier's responses to how horrible he was. The look on their faces both times was, in my opinion, just incredible. Joel Kinnaman, when he was killed, and you could see the tears in his eyes, and he says, "Peacemaker, what a joke." That was amazing. Although I think he could have I wish he had won. I'm like, where were your guns, Rick Flag? I got to see that sequence again. Although it was very comic booky, and then I thought they hit each other enough times with blunt instruments that I was surprised the fight was still going. But I think that nobody could believe that Rick Flag died over this, including Rick Flag, which made it all the more tragic. And to James Gunn's credit, that really got me emotionally. I was very upset about that scene, and I think obviously we were supposed to be. And then when Rick Flag is dead, and you pan to see that Ratcatcher saw the whole thing, that was incredible. That was really great. And then also her question to Peacemaker when she says, why don't you just destroy the evidence and let me live? And his answer was, because I'm thorough. That's not actually true. And I don't know if Peacemaker would have given her the correct answer. I think he also wants to come across as quote unquote cool. But the real answer, of course, is that since she knows about it, she is also evidence that has to be destroyed. And then the Bloodsport literally dropped in with the ceiling dropping in like, in a way that he could survive it. It would fall and stop for a second and then fall again, like as the building pancaked. That was really well done. And the moment he dropped in and then he looks and he sees that Peacemaker has a gun drawn on Ratcatcher 2, who he promised to protect, and Ratcatcher 2 looking at him like, this is it for me if you don't step in. I thought that all worked out really, really well. I wish that she could have saved him. I guess they did. She did save him. They both said that's kind of beautiful. They both said in the bus, I'll save you. No, I'll save you. And they both did. he saved her there, and then she saved him with Starro with all the rats, and she literally put her arm around him and all the rats ran over him. And that really was gorgeous, which makes my second favorite scene even better because that's part of that. And of course, during that scene, she remembers back to a conversation she had with her father, and where she says, "Why rats, Papa?" And he says, you know, basically he talks about how some people view the disenfranchised, the poor and the homeless, as like a human equivalent to rats, a scourge on society. And that he wanted to show that if rats could be redeemed and could be helpful to society, then that meant that anyone could. And I just couldn't believe how powerful that was. It was so well said, and they're overlooking Brazil. And Brazil has real problems with this, by the way, real classism in Brazil, horrible problems with this. So it was a great location for them to come from. And it was such a short moment. It was such a short exchange, but it was one of the best, if not, well, I think all these were great. But I mean, I really felt the third act of the movie had some real gut punches in a really good way. And I love that. I feel that Daniela Melchier's Ratcatcher 2 should have been the person to get a spin-off show based off of this movie. And she's new to Hollywood. She's available. I mean, obviously some other actors, you know, they can't do it or their characters didn't survive the movie. But she clearly should. I think people would be very excited to watch a show that she was in. Whereas I think after this movie with Peacemaker, you're like, I don't know. Like, you want to be a loyal DC fan, but he's just so horrible. And I feel irredeemable. I worry about that because, you know, and I don't think he's clever in a Homelander sort of way. Homelander, Tony Starr makes that character very charismatic. But if Peacemaker, if it's excusable because he's saving the world, like they say at the end credit scene, oh, well, he's got to save the world. I'm sure someone else could save the world. This SOB should rot in jail. All right, so let me talk on that note about my least favorite scenes. My least favorite scene by far and away is when they executed the freedom fighters. I knew they were killing the wrong guys. I knew because they weren't checking, and these guys weren't even fighting them back, which made it even worse. So these guys, the freedom fighters were just waking up. In some cases, were killed in their sleep. And they didn't just kill them, but they tortured them to show off for one another. It was really a horrific competition. And I thought like one of the worst moments was when Peacemaker used an axe on that guy when he was sleeping and just chopped him up like sushi. I thought that was just disgusting. And then they played it for laughs when they break into the headquarters and they see Rick Flag, you know, laughing with the leader because he's friends with them, and they're like, oh, our bad. And the fact, I mean, I guess the leader did say, to save my country, I would make a deal with the devil, but I think she should have shot one of them and been like, I gotta at least take somebody. I mean, she has to avenge their death to some degree. I mean, I just thought it was awful. You know, Rick Flag plays it like, oh, wah, wah, and you're just like, I mean, I think there was something supposed to be a commentary there on how Americans don't take care of the people in foreign countries who help them, and that is unfortunately very true. But since it was done almost entirely from the American perspective, and again, played for laughs, it just came across as really callous, and I thought horrible, really bad. All right, my second least favorite scene was Harley's General in the Showgirl sequence. And this really highlights, I think, a lot of the problems that James Gunn periodically through all of his work has had and how he portrays sexual situations. So first off, again, I didn't like that Harley was once again valued only for her sex appeal. And I talked about this a little bit in my non-spoiler review. And one of you made an interesting comment that most of you are familiar with Harley Quinn from the video games, where she is portrayed only as the sexy ditz and have no familiarity with her in the animated series where she originated, which is sad because that's where her best work is, and that's what makes the character so great. The fact that so many people just think of Harley as a sexy clown is very sad to me, because, you know, that's not what she is. She's supposed to really be a symbol for, you know, abused women, and then becomes eventually an empowerment of that. So I guess that explains why some people are okay with this portrayal, but it shows once again the lack of consistency across the board for characters at Warner Brothers. The way they splinter it creates these problems where you have fan bases approaching characters from a different perspective. But overall, this was a horrific positive spin on raping a prisoner. I just couldn't believe it, that Harley Quinn would have a good reaction to being dressed up and to be served on a platter for this guy who wants to have sex with her, and it's okay because he's hot and super rich and he gives her nice clothes. I mean, you're fantasizing this scenario, and I think too often the rapist feels that that's where he's coming from, and that's how he makes it okay in his mind. So it was almost like this story was being told from the general's POV, and excusing it, and it was really bad. I mean, the fact that Harley was okay with it made it seem like women would be all right with it, and it was really bad. At the end of the day, he's saying, if you don't want to be a prisoner and likely killed, you have to sleep with me and be my, bride. And I just thought that was horrific. And I just thought there are just so many problems with that, presenting it that way. I can't believe that no one has said anything about it. I think it's, pure pressure with the way the movie was at first received, and I think wanting to back James Gunn up after what happened with him at Disney. I think under any normal circumstances, I think people would have a huge problem with that. Then, also, I thought it was ridiculous that he would turn his back on a known criminally insane killer. As soon as he turned his back to her, I knew she was going to kill him. I had wished that this was all part of her plan. Maybe that would have put a little bit of a pause, made it somewhat redeemable. But then she has this thing where she said, I promised myself if I met a guy and there were any more red flags, that I would kill him. And because she's like, killing kids is the red flag. And I'm like, really? How about when he had Boomerang killed? Or Rick Flag, who either, as far as Harley Quinn knows, was either killed in that mission gone wrong or is being held somewhere else. She doesn't even ask about him. So I think that I know Harley is insane, but her reasoning in this movie, I think, more often than not, made her come across as unsympathetic, including the Milton scene, which we'll talk about in another portion of this video. But first, let's go back to a positive. I want to talk about my thoughts on the best visuals in the film, because it was full of really amazing visuals. I thought by far and away the best visuals were the rain sequence. I love the way it started. It felt very much like a tropical, sudden rainstorm. I thought that was, like a sun shower. I thought that was gorgeous. And the way that they would disappear into the light, I thought was really cool. And then they would come back out. I thought that visually it was just used extremely well. And the way the camera was moving, I just thought that was really impressive. Second, I have three best visuals. First, second, and third place. But although the movie is just chock full of them. Second was all the concrete dust in the third act after the building pancaked. I mean, that just looked incredible. It made all the action sequences look amazing, and Bloodsport and Harley in particular looked really good. I mean, it just was a fantastic filter for them. I thought so many amazing screenshots from those sequences because of it. It was a really strong idea from a production standpoint. And then third, Polka Dot Man's powers. I just thought they were incredible. The rainbow glow when he expelled them. When we first saw them, when he went into the jungle to throw them up and you kind of just saw them in the background there, I thought that was really compelling and really well done. Even the virus, the way it was stuck inside of him, it was both beautiful and horrific at the same time. I just really thought I never thought Polka Dot Man could be so cool. And I wouldn't have killed the character. I thought the polka dots were very effective. Although I thought he could have taken Starro down all by himself. If I'd be like, just empty yourself out, buddy, and raise him up, get him up there. I think that would have worked. I would have preferred that to Harley. I don't think you can, by the way, breathe in someone's eye. I guess she was holding her breath, but I think that fluid, it's a little bit different than that. But let's talk about Starro. All right, beyond Starro, I had mixed feelings on. I mean, they really went for it. Beyond disgusting. Oh, every part about it, when it screamed and you could kind of see, it was just disgusting. But so was a face hugger. It's supposed to be disgusting. Now, I did think it was interesting that it could talk through the people that it was controlling, which of course is from the comics, but I liked that they all talked in unison. I thought that was done well. But the star on your face, as I said in my non-spoiler review, in the comics, you can pry that sucker off and you're okay. Not here. Here it takes all the skin and the features off and leaves a star-shaped imprint. And I thought that was just very disturbing, as it was meant to be. I could have lived without the torture chamber visuals, though. I thought that I liked that it was making a point about who was being experimented on, not like political dissidents, journalists. I mean, that we've seen that in the news lately. It's horrifying. But I felt that was secondary. I think that James Gunn reversed what should have been the A and B elements of that scene. The A should have been who was being experimented on, And the B should have been the visuals. I think, it seemed like it was being played to be sensationalized, and then it had those other elements to get away with it. So that was my problem with it. Like, I didn't need to see that guy cut in half, and the top half was still functioning, but yet he was still, I don't know where the liquids inside were coming from. If he had, unless they just recently cut him in half, having to see that guy's face, or they ripped the star off. I mean, it was just horrible. Also, speaking of the star grabbing people's faces, when the Suicide Squad saw that that's what it was doing, I thought it made sense that Ratcatcher put her mask on. I was like, if only Bloodsport's mask hadn't shattered just moments earlier. But then they're like, keep him off your face, everybody. And so everyone just waves their arms in front of their face, and for some reason that works. I don't understand why the other soldiers around them didn't do the same thing. Only the Suicide Squad is smart enough. And the Suicide Squad, by the way, was an incredibly stupid team. They couldn't get anything done. I thought it wasn't worth the risk of them talking to send them into the field. I thought that the odds were they would make situations worse. I don't know how Amanda Waller ever got the Suicide Squad approved if this is how it operated. But anyway, I don't understand why everybody else, and even the civilians, didn't hide their faces. It seems like something you would instinctually do if something was coming for your face, to hide your face. So either it just doesn't work, or it should be an effective way to avoid that for everyone, I would think. Then I thought it was ridiculous that Waller was like, get off the island. We don't care. Having problems on this island works in our favor. And you're like, you don't think this giant alien starfish is going to get off the island? I mean, you could certainly have some of his beings get on a boat that he's controlling, and then bring something over or find a way to get off. The fact that Amanda Waller thought that, I mean, I can see her saying, get off the island, I'm just going to nuke it from space. That would be unreasonable orders for her. But for her to feel this wasn't her problem anymore made absolutely no sense. And then I thought it was crazy that at the end of the movie, they tried to get us to be sympathetic for Starro. And Starro was like, I was having such a good time just floating in space looking at the stars. I'm like, really, Starro? So when you controlled those astronauts that took you in, why didn't you just have them open the bay hatch and go and jettison you back into space and be like, whew, that was a close one. It made absolutely no sense. And then why are you trying to murder everybody now instead of just trying to get yourself back into space? I had very little sympathy. It's the same with a lot of the Suicide Squad members being like, our parents were horrible to us, so therefore we can be mean. I'm like, where does it end? Maybe your grandfather was horrible to your mother or father, and so that's where it all started, and it's just a long chain of parental abuse. You got to stop it somewhere, and that's just not a reasonable excuse. I mean, it might be an origin, it might be some of your motivations, but it certainly doesn't make it excusable. All right, Corto Maltese. I was shocked at the lack of dignity that was given to the portrayal of the soldiers and the civilians of this island. Nobody cared about any of them, including the people who made the movie. That was just shocking. I mean, James Gunn portrayed them exactly how he was criticizing society for viewing the rats that the Ratcatcher 1 and 2 were talking about. I mean, Hollywood has a problem of constantly looking down at regular people, and one of the reasons that Steven Spielberg has done so well for himself is that he elevates regular people and puts them on a pedestal. I mean, the Milton discussion was meant to be funny, but I didn't think it was funny at all. I mean, I was with Polka Dot Man. It made Polka Dot Man very sympathetic, but it made Harley look so stupid and callous, especially when she then later called Bloodshot Milton. I didn't think that was funny, and it meant that Milton's death really did mean nothing, because Polka Dot Man wasn't going to remember him because he was dead, tragically, and Harley certainly wasn't going to remember him, and I think Bloodshot just didn't care, which, was, I guess, in character. But really, really, really sad. Just so sad. And so many of them were killed. Like, as soon as a starfish hit your face in this movie, you were dead. And I don't think that enough was done to highlight that. It was just very, very, very sad. Then, speaking of very sad, animal cruelty. All right, so I think that I was shocked. They played the Johnny Cash song when the movie started, and I was like, oh, yeah. And then Savant killed that bird, and I was like, uh-oh. I started to get nervous about what the movie would be. And sure enough, that's what it was in many places. Now, when I thought back on this, I was like, maybe this is kind of a Birdman of Alcatraz reference, right? And there is the Prince and the Showgirl reference for what happens with Harley and that general. So I guess to some degree, it's good that James Gunn thought of these movies to reference, but he did a sloppy job referencing them, so I don't think you can really get that much credit for it. It just was sloppy and didn't understand what the movies themselves were trying to say. And then, while it doesn't have to say the same thing, it didn't offer an interesting contrast or commentary. You know, it was just like, like Birdman of Alcatraz, only here he kills the bird. How bitchin' is that? And you're like, what? So he killed the bird, and then I guess another bird ate his neck after his head exploded, but it wasn't the same bird, so I didn't feel that was vengeance. And then lighting the birds on fire. I mean, that was totally unnecessary and just an odd choice for a scene. Again, it just seemed like it was done for the cool factor, but yet it's not at all cool. I don't think that Warner Brothers or James Gunn appreciates how much people hate animal cruelty, as they should. I was watching Movies That Made Us season 2 the other day, and they talked about a Back to the Future test screening, and they said they were surprised at how quiet the audience got for that moment with the first test of the DeLorean, that they thought that they'd killed the dog. And they said, wow, people just were not going to come back from that, but then they were so happy to see that Einstein was okay. So I think that, for a scene, for something in the movie that means nothing and is just there to be cruel and disgusting, I don't know why you would put that in your movie. It's a little bit like some of the full frontal nudity. Like, you don't need it. Like, why limit your audience like that for something that does not? I mean, if you had an interesting commentary on the Birdman of Alcatraz, maybe I would allow that scene. But the other stuff, it's just done to be like, it really is just like when someone kills an animal. It's senseless cruelty, just for that person's entertainment, which is so disturbing. All right, then last I want to talk about Amanda Waller, because I said I felt in the movie she was humiliated, and I want to explain why I said that. So in the beginning, I thought she was really handled very well. I thought that her shots were very cool of how she was in the prison. I loved her dialogue, how she handled herself. I thought it was going really well. And I loved when she was practicing golf, when she said, I have to play with the senator. I got to make sure I don't embarrass myself. I thought that was really great stuff. I mean, it really showed her as a real player in the arena that she's supposed to be in. So I thought that was all fantastic. I thought it was an interesting choice to have the people who worked in the Task Force X placing bets on who would die first. It made them all really unlikable, but I felt that it was realistic. And also, hey, if you work that job and you are exploding people's heads and you are around all that callousness and horror all the time, you probably would be desensitized to it. So I actually thought that was a valid creative choice. I thought it was, I love seeing that kind of stuff in a movie, the behind the scenes stuff of what it's like for the normies. So that interested me. But then to have them knock Waller out, and even more so, to work over her crumpled body on the floor, which we actually saw in frame, I thought that went too far. And as I said, I thought bordered on, well, I would actually call it misogynistic. You would never see henchmen in a story do that to the Joker or Lex Luthor, where they would knock them out and then just continue to carry out the scene or a new directive over that character's body. Like, imagine if you didn't like the way James Gunn was filming or editing the movie, right? So what if his crew members would come up behind him and knock him out on the floor? He falls over on the floor, and they just continue to direct the movie or edit the movie over him. How do you come back from that? That's the issue there. How do you continue to work with those people after they've done that to you? Now, at the end, they say Waller's punishment is to put them on their own show for the Peacemaker show. Here's what I think Waller would have realistically done if anyone had the nerve to do that to her. Because she can't have that happening again. They can't think that's a way to handle Waller in the future. So they already set the stage for her going to play golf, right? So I think what should have happened is, while she was playing golf and was out of the office, what do you know? There was a strike on the Task Force X headquarters, killing all those people. And that way, she could have maintained her dignity. And so I think that's really the only way that you can get out. I mean, having her just have an ice pack on her head, looking out at her office, being like, wow, they all hate me. I just think she's obviously lost total control of the program. I don't know how she goes forward from that. So that's my spoiler review of The Suicide Squad. I'm excited to hear your favorite and least favorite scenes down below, what you thought were the best visuals, what your take is on some of the things that I brought up. And then again, I'm going to do another video specifically on the characters tomorrow. And I hope that you will join me this evening for the watch along. Again, I'm not going to hate on the movie. We're going to have a great time. And, I'll point out some of my favorite things when we go through there. All right, so share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.